I am Michelle Hampton. I am the Associate Director of Global Client Relations for TOEFL and GRE, which is a very long way of saying I am the face of TOEFL and GRE to GRE test takers throughout the U.S. And for TOEFL, I work with colleges and universities around the world for the English language proficiency assessment. So it's a mixed bag. There are international students who go to grad school, so sometimes I talk about both. But my efforts with you today, as they are with many student groups that I talk to around the world, are to help them understand the tests, and by giving you the chance to take advantage, oh bless you, of the free test prep that we offer and have had for years. It lets you get a sense of exactly what the test is like from the people who make the test. So with that in mind, we're going to plunge ahead. There's some things I want you to know before you take the test. And we'll cover those. When I talk about taking the test tonight, I brought with me some things, and Dr. Felder already alluded to the fact that you get 3 pieces of scratch paper. When you go for the actual test, that's all you'll have when you first sit down. There's a 10-minute break during the test. At that time, you usually replenish your scratch paper, although you'd be able to raise your hand at any time and ask for more. Some students use it to outline their essay. Some other students use it because it just helps them to doodle. Other students use it for the math questions. And some students just happen to make paper airplanes and fold strange shapes. No matter what, with the scratch paper, we collect it at the end of the administration and we shred it. So it never leaves the building, it never leaves the testing room that you're in. But it does give you the comfort of being able to write down, if that helps you in organizing your thoughts for the essay, or as I said, working out some of the problems for the math, if that's also a help. Another piece that is back on that last table is, and some of you may have already grabbed it, it's a little black and white sheet.
You want them to have it now?
Yeah. This actually is your chart to help you understand the scores you're going to get tonight when you take the practice test. It's the same score scale as used when you take the official test, so that way you'll also be able to see your progress as you experience this. It has 3 tables on it. The table to the left gives you the scale score, as well as then the percentile rank that equates to that score in the verbal reasoning section of the test, in the quantitative reasoning section of the test. The analytical writing, or the 2 essays that are part of the test, have a completely different score scale because you're writing 2 essays. The verbal reasoning and the quantitative reasoning are multiple choice questions. So with that in mind, it's a different scale. The bottom right-hand side of the sheet on the chart shows you what the mean scores are for the students who took the test, in this case, between August 1st, 2011, when we first rolled it out, and June 30th of 2013. So it gives you a sense of what the average performance was in each of the 3 sections. We consider each section of the test its own, technically, test. It's assessing different skills and different abilities. Therefore, we at the GRE do not add them together, your verbal and your quant. That's not a good practice in our minds, because, using me as an example, I have struggled in math ever since grammar school. Doesn't mean I can't do it, but I'm certainly not lightning quick, and it's not a natural gift. But thank God, there's always essay questions, and there's a verbal section on most tests, because that saves my bacon every time. When I took this test, it validated that same thing. I haven't changed. Natural skills and abilities are just that. So if you were to combine my verbal and my quant, the scores would be okay, but it does not give you a sense of the fact that math is hard for me. I would not be an architect. I should never be a mathematician. God help us. So it's important to keep that in mind. As we go through, you'll also see another piece that I handed most of you, or you can certainly pick it up on the back table if I didn't get to you. This is what we consider the basic GRE brochure. It covers everything from how your scores are reported, the ability that we'll talk about a little later, to select which set of scores you send, the different sections of the test, what's in each section. We talk about the test prep that we offer, both the free test prep and the priced test prep. Our most expensive thing is $35, so it's a big difference. And we also have, for those of you who use your smartphones and go to the QR things, if you find that you have friends who didn't make it here tonight but might want more information about GRE, you can have them scan this with their phone. It takes them right to the GRE website. So, let's get into it. I wrote my nickname on the board mainly because not only am I a very slow typer, but it's just quicker and easier to just say Shell. I know you mean me. I'm the only Shell in the room probably, so we can go from there. There might be a lot of Michelles though, so that's helpful. We're going to cover quickly and briefly before you actually take the test how it's designed, what it is you're going to see so far as question types, getting your scores, the tools, and some additional info. I'll be quick about it because I want you to have the most time to test, but I definitely want to be available to answer any questions you have. I have business cards here. They have my email, my cell phone number. I was in New York not too long ago, so I keep saying mobile, but my cell phone number, so you can reach me with questions that you have. But one of the things I do want to stress is that graduate school is an important and worthwhile endeavor, not only for the challenge and the stimulation of the academic achievement that you can have, but also because it makes a difference to your quality of life. As you can see here, when we look at the data from the Department of Labor for 2013, for those students at the top who had received a doctoral degree or the professional degree or the master's degree, it really made a difference to their bottom line, the quality of life that they had, the vacations they could take, the house they could afford, the car they could drive. So if you finish with just your bachelor's and you go into the workforce, there's nothing wrong with that. There are many companies in the world that will pay for your graduate study. It might also be a situation where it's required, such as those students who are looking to go for an MBA. They want you to have work experience before you come and get your MBA. So doing that, as you can see, has quite a price differential. A student who had completed a master's would have earned up to 20% more than a student who has just a bachelor's. When we look at the student who has a professional degree, and by that I mentioned here the CPAs, the MBAs, those students are actually able to earn 55% more than a student who has just a bachelor's. And when we look at the doctorate, and mind you, while you certainly can be an academician, as Dr. Felder is, and actually work at a university campus, a doctorate can also make a difference in the workforce. It enables you to earn up to 50% more in a job. So going to graduate school can really mean a lot to your future, the quality of life for you and your family. So, if you're looking at grad school or business school, now the GRE is accepted by both. So it's a situation where you can take one test, apply to either grad program, and have the opportunity to have your scores be valid. GRE scores are valid for 5 years from the date that you took it, which means that it's still active and alive and can be used. So if you're like many students and you're kind of on the fence, I don't know if I want an MBA, maybe I want a master's, let's say you do your master's first. 2 years of your life, you do the program. Your scores are now still good for another 3 years. If you wanted to get an MBA while you're working, you could, and your scores, again, would be valid during that 3-year time period. If it's a case where you know you want to continue on straight through from your master's and get your doctorate, if you do it within the 5 years, the scores are still valid, you don't have to retest. So there are some pluses to thinking about your plan of attack. Some things you need to know. There are 3 sections to the test. The analytical writing, what we call the 2 essays, we always give that to you first, the minute you sit down and take the test. The reason being is your brain is freshest and your fingers are freshest because you're typing your essay answers. And we want you to be able to think critically and analyze, and that's what we're measuring in that section. There are 2 essays that you're going to answer. Each one has 30 minutes in the time period. So the first hour of your test, no matter where you test in the world, will always be the 2 essays. There are many pluses to that. Even tonight, that would be the first thing. One thing, though, that is a drawback is when we conduct the scoring, both the practice test you'll take tonight and the official test, we use humans to score your essays, which is actually great, because a human can decide, all right, I see where you were going with this essay, I get the meaning, I understand your viewpoint. A machine doesn't have that ability. It can say if this was a real sentence, it can say if you answered fully in X amount of time, but it's not going to be able to pass that evaluation. So because we rely on humans, we have to score your essays after the test. So even in taking the practice test today and the official test, at the end, you'll get an estimated verbal score and an estimated quant score because they're multiple choice questions. And it is that machine that can score multiple choice. It's either A, B, C. Very simple. So in the case of the verbal reasoning and the quantitative reasoning, there are 2 sections of each that make up the rest of the test. The order in which they appear is random. So you may have a verbal, quant. The person next to you may have 2 quants and then 2 verbals, etc. So any combination is possible, and every time you test, it's every possible combination. But you will always have 2 verbal and 2 quant. In the case of both sections, you can see there are 20 questions. And the time differential is reflective of the fact that in quant, or the math section of the test, you're working on problems. So we give you a little bit more time. And that, I think, is very helpful. You'll also find that if you're testing in America, and I know most of you plan to, you will be taking the test on the computer. We do offer a paper-based version of the test, but for the most part, we're giving that in parts of the world where they can't connect electronically for the 4 hours of the testing window. If the power cuts out in the middle of a test, not only would you be mad, but you'd be really mad. And we don't want that to happen. So that's why we give the paper-based test in those locations. If students need learning accommodations, we offer that. The test can be given in Braille, large print type, all sorts of possibilities. And we've also had students who've broken their arm the day before they needed to take the test and needed help. So nothing is beyond our scope. We will work with you on it. I mentioned before that the analytical writing is always first, and then the 2 verbal and 2 quant and a variety of options. One thing I do want to stress is when you take the real test, not the one today, but you'll see that you may have either an unscored section, and if that's the case, it's a situation where you won't know which section is unscored, so it might be an extra verbal, it might be an extra quant. In the research section, we clearly mark that, because that's information that we use to maybe create a new question in the future. And we think it's important for you to be aware of it. Neither of those sections factor into your score. So it certainly helps to take the test and do the best that you can. I mentioned before there's a 10-minute break, and because you're taking it on the computer, that 10-minute break starts the minute the screen changes and says you now have a 10-minute break. Most students get up at that time, go to the restroom, use it to refresh their paper, as I mentioned before. But at the 11th minute, the test resumes. Whether you're paying attention to the screen or not, whether you're in the room or not. I was giving this at a university in Georgia, and I had a young lady who sat at her computer the whole 10 minutes, but she was fascinated by her nails. And so the computer started right back up at 11 minutes, and she just was all in her hand. And I can't say, look at the screen, because we're trying to help you understand what it would be like on test day. So by the time she looked up, she had lost 5 minutes. You can't get that back. So could that have made a difference in her score? Maybe. Could have allowed her more time for a question, maybe 2 questions. So keep that in mind. The unscheduled break is also important because, again, you lose the time and you will not get it back. When you're going through the analytical writing section, we ask you for one of your essays to analyze an issue and the other to analyze an argument. We make sure that we take out your ability to access the internet, but we do want you to be able to do some basic editing. That's only fair. You're trying to write an essay, you would like it to make sense, so you'll still have access to that. And in tonight's efforts, it's your choice if you want to take the time to answer the 2 essay questions. As I mentioned, it can't be scored tonight, so you're not going to get feedback on what you write. Certainly, it doesn't hurt to read it, see what it's like. In the case of all of our essays that are used in the GRE Revised General Test, they are all posted online. Every possible question that is currently in use that you could take as a test taker is online right now. So you could go out there and practice. If writing in a timed environment is a challenge for you, I would recommend doing that. Get the kitchen clock, get the kitchen timer, get your best friend, sit down and time yourself. Practice writing in that 30-minute window, so that way your essays will have better polish. You'll feel more competent and capable. This is an example of what an issue task is. And the purple at the top is the actual statement. That is the issue. So you're then asked through the prompt, which is the black part here, to specifically state your position. You'll notice that it's very clear as to what we want you to do. We want you, in developing and supporting your position, you should consider ways in which the statement might or might not hold true. We're doing that so that that way your essay is focused and you're getting the most out of it. And it also means that you have a good content in it. In the argument task, same sort of thing. Obviously, though, a lot more text in purple. But when we get down to what we're asking you to do, we're asking you to write your response and be sure to explain your assumptions. So when we score the essay, I mentioned before, it's done with a combination of a human, and in this case also we use our E-Rater electronic scoring system to just validate that the human didn't miss anything. So far as the actual, it is a sentence, it does make sense, it is grammar, but it is a situation where the scores on the essays, we combine the two scores, the raw scores that are given, to create one score for the essay section, for the analytical writing section. And it's scored from 0 to 6 in half-point increments. So the essay could get a 4.5, it could get a 5, it could get a 5.5. You will find that depending on the grad program you're looking at, that score can be important, it can be persuasive, it may also not be looked at. It really does depend on the area in which you're concentrating. As we go through this, fire away with any questions if you have it. In the case of verbal reasoning, again, it's a reasoning test. So we're asking you to apply a little bit of logic. It's multiple choice, so the answer is there. You just have to reason which one is the right answer or the right answers. I want to point out, when we talk about the multiple choice questions, you'll notice here we indicate that some multiple choice questions have one answer. That's obvious because the fill in the oval is an oval. If you get a question that is multiple choice and has more than one possible answer, instead of an oval, it's a square. So you can use that as a tip to instantly realize, oh, there's more than one answer for this question. It's a square that I'm filling in. Select in passage. That's kind of funky because that's where you're highlighting the text that answers the question. So we'll look at some examples of all of these. Here's an oval. So how many questions are correct here? How many answers are correct? Just one. I know that's tiny print and I'm not expecting you to be able to read it. But in this case, there are two right answers because it's squares. Yeah? Here is a select in passage. So you use your cursor to highlight where the answer is within the question. Another way to notice it is if you get to it and the whole side on the right is blank like this, hint, it's text in passage. That's the only time you'll see that. When we talk about the text completion, or fill in the blank as it used to be called, here you can see there are three of them, 3 blanks that you have to fill in. And you do have to get all 3 right in order to get the 1 point. Every question in the verbal reasoning and the quantitative reasoning is worth only 1 point. We do not deduct any points if you get it wrong. We do not give half points. You either get 1 or you get none. So you want to try and answer as many questions as possible to improve the likelihood of you getting a better score. Okay, more, again, square, you have more than one. In the case of the quant, we also have a built-in online calculator that you can use. It is completely optional, but you will find you cannot bring a calculator into the test. You have to use the one that we provide that's built into the test. So one of the benefits of using the Power Prep 2 that we're going to do tonight is you become familiar with how to use that. There's nothing worse than walking in test day cold and not knowing how to work the calculator, losing time trying to figure out, well, how do I even get it to appear on the screen? What do I hit? How can I transfer the display? What? So avoid all that confusion using Power Prep 2, getting a sense of how it works before you take the test. We also, in redesigning the test, came up with some new question types here. Again, very similar. Oh, one thing I do want to point out. When we talk about the quantitative reasoning section of the test, many students are concerned with, well, how much math is involved? Depending on what your degree was in undergrad, you may or may not have had much math. I was a psych major undergrad. It was stats that I had. Statistics is not here. This is basic high school math that I had not done since high school when I took the test. So I took advantage of the free math prep that we offer. But it is a case where if you have strong ability in math, you're fine. Again, some examples. Here's one where they use the calculator, but we realize that not everybody does use it or need it. So you have those options. I want to skip ahead. So when we talk about the data interpretation, which is basically eyeballing charts, you'll see there are charts, there are tables, and you can look at it and reason what the answer is, but you can also work it out if you have that ability. Either is viable in order for you to answer the question. Again, there's ovals, so we know it's just one possible answer. So the way that we score the verbal reasoning and the quantitative reasoning sections is the 2 verbal and the 2 quant. We make sure to take a look at the number of questions that you got right in the first section of verbal or the first section of quant, and we make sure that that then reflects also to the level of difficulty we add together, or we do statistical analysis to analyze the number of total questions you got right and the difficulty level to determine then the rigor or the challenge of the second section in verbal. So let's say you come for the test, you had a really bad morning, you take the first verbal section, you really struggled. So when you get the second verbal section, you'll still have some challenging questions, but it won't be as challenging as what you would have experienced if you had a perfect morning and you did very well on the first half of the test. So there'll still be some challenge, you'll still have a chance to improve your score in that second section, but because you struggled in the first one, there's no way you could get a perfect score. Now, we talk about the fact that you can use the changes of the test to change your answers, mark questions, skip questions, and navigate freely. That's a main point of our time together tonight, is for you to become familiar with these buttons at the top. They vary a little bit between the verbal reasoning and the quantitative reasoning, but you'll find that the quantitative reasoning is the only one where you can click on the calc button and bring up a calculator. The help that is available in verbal is different than the help in quant, but becoming familiar with those tonight will save you time on test day. And that's some of the information that I think is going to be helpful for you. There's a review option that many of you will have the chance to look at and use, and if you're using your own laptop, that's one of the benefits, because the test, Power Prep 1, which you'll take tonight, will be saved to your laptop. You can go in and review your answers and see what you got right, see what you got wrong. If we were doing this in a computer lab, it wouldn't be saved. You wouldn't be able to access it again. So there are some benefits here. You'll also have the ability then, too, to use Power Prep 2, the other full-length test in there at your leisure, as prep before you take the test, or go ahead and prepare separately using some of the other services we offer, and then take it before your official test. You want to answer all the questions. You want to be attentive to time, but try not to rush, and check for obvious errors. So the score scale in the verbal and the quant goes from a low of 130 to a high of 170 in 1-point increments. So you can get a 167, a 168. You'll get unofficial scores at the end of the real test and the end tonight. It will be just for your verbal and just for your quant, because again, they're multiple choice. Now, when you take the real test, you'll have the ability to choose to send your scores on to an institution after you've seen them. A button will appear at the end of the test asking you if you want to report your scores or cancel your scores. The only way to see this is to say you want to report. If you did not list any institutions, your scores aren't going anywhere. But at least you'll get to see your efforts tonight and anytime you take the test. Okay, so those are the main things I wanted to cover before you take it. Are there questions? Yes.
If you choose not to report your scores to a certain university right then, is there a way for you to go back and send them later?
There is. Everybody heard that, right? Can you send your scores later if you choose to do that? Yes, we call Score Select is the option you have where you can choose which set of scores from a single test date you send on to an institution. So in your case, you're asking, what can I do after test day? Yeah? So in this case, you'll have 3 options because you've taken the test. Let's say you've taken it 3 times. You can choose to send the test date performance from today. You could choose to send your scores from back in March when you took it, or your scores from January. That gives you the option, you have that option if you choose to send any. You can also, under any, send both March and January, or March and September. In the case of all, and again, this is another option, you can send all of your scores from all 3 test dates. I mention that because there are some grad programs that still ask to see all of your scores, because that used to be the process up until 2011. And with that in mind, they expect to see them all. They won't know how many times you took it unless you tell them. So if they see 1 set of scores or 2 or 3, they'll deal with what they have. But if they, as an institution, operate in which they take your best verbal out of all 3 attempts, separate from your best quant out of all 3 attempts, which is a service we don't provide because that's actually bad practice in scores. But if that institution does that, then it might not hurt you to send them all. Let them choose the best possible performance for you. But that's a question you can ask them. So you have a choice. You can send your scores you know already that you might be applying to Clemson. So you could say, I want to use my 4 free scores. I'll send 1 set to Clemson, another set to here, another set to there. So you have that option. Yes?
So once you completed like all 20 questions, can you go back to any questions? Or just...
Within a section, you can go back. So if you do the first verbal, those first questions, you can, within that section, go back and forth. Yes. Once you leave that section, no going back. Sure? All right, guys. Did any of you ahead of time load Power Prep 2 onto your computers? No. Okay. All right. So let's go to etf.org/GRE.